Some people say that for you to be a good debater, for you to be good at anything, actually, you need to be at least slightly crazy in order to reach the sort of heights in which you want to achieve. But, I'm not even sure if the person who made that quote actually expected somebody like Apollo to come about. TKA, the king of debating. Some call him, well, no, not some, nobody calls him the legend of debating. That's his self-given title. Calls himself Apollo. Well, he used to be Ajax, and before that he used to be, I'm pretty sure it was something Los Polos. Apollo is a well-known and easy-to-hate individual within the platform of Discord debating. He's also made his appearance on TikTok, which I will let you know now that he's not very well liked or well respected on TikTok. He is actually spoken about behind his back on a variety of occasions, on a variety of lives. His reputation precedes him, actually. He's made himself known generally on Discord to most of the people who know him currently for not only his egotistical behavior, but also his inability to portray concepts such in philosophy in a manner in which a layman will easily be able to understand, which is a flaw that he's constantly been tackling within each and every conversation he's ever had, especially with his debates against Jester. These are the sorts of issues you'll immediately be able to notice upon witnessing him. His large amount of supporters and detractors, but also the several scandals have gotten him into, make Apollo extremely easy to recognize, and especially whenever you hear the name Apollo or you hear his little dirty Jamaican mouth open and you hear the hot breath that is emanating onto his mic, it is very hard to miss. Rather than sitting here and giving you all an unbiased perspective on who Apollo is, how good he is, what I don't like about him specifically, giving you factual evidence all on its own. Rather, that's actually way too boring for me to do. Instead, I'm just going to sit here and say all of the things that I don't like about Apollo. Because if you strip away everything debating related, you strip away his rhetoric, argumentation, and the vast quote-unquote amount of knowledge that he has, what you get is not only an individual with poor reasoning skills, but also an individual who has an inability to interact with women, somebody who can't talk about anything except for himself. He has an inability to hold a conversation. He's socially awkward. He can't speak to women properly. He's extremely disrespectful. He knows nothing about anything if it isn't inclusive of debating. And whenever he does speak about sports, you notice that the only reason he does speak about sports is to liken it to himself, where he calls himself the Ronaldo of debating. I'm here to speak about somebody who essentially is just a government-created robot who's been injected into your lives, injected into your mind, so that whenever you open the app, not only do you have a fresh source of entertainment, but also somebody new to laugh at, and maybe on occasion, whenever he has these moments of brightness, somebody who's actually able to say something intelligent. As they say, a broken clock is right twice a day. Apollo is usually like that. You notice that his performances either range from extremely good to extremely horrible, and also his behavior towards you will also range from extremely good to extremely horrible, actually entirely depending on how you treat him and the sort of respect you give him as a debater. But in reality, if you engage with him as a neutral party who's entirely unrelated to debating, especially if you're a member of the opposite gender, you'll notice the absolute freak that comes out inside of Apollo. But before we move on to the freakish nature of Apollo, let's go back to the time where he was called Ajax. Whenever I first met Apollo specifically, this was when I was still I was fresh off of coming to the UK. I didn't really speak in VC. I had a heavy accent. You may say that I still have an accent now, but it was way more heavy in the past. He was called Ajax. It was just after I merged my server with his own. I had this little Discord server like Naruto debate related. His name was Ajax. He hung around with people like Nana. This was at the time where you could say that you could look this guy in the eye, speak to him, and you could actually say it was normal. Well, albeit there were some signs that I should have noticed immediately I met up with Apollo, right? The first thing is, Apollo is completely incapable of engaging in conversation when it is either A, joining you with making fun of somebody else, or B, talking about debating, or C, just talking about the verse or the topic he's interested in debating in. Aside from any of those things, Apollo is fundamentally incapable of engaging in conversation. If you ask this guy how his day was, and you ask him and then you get past all of the small talk, the first thing that you actually get into specifically is how good of a debater he is, or the topics in which he's interested in debating. Usually Apollo would surround himself like people like Nano, people who are funny, independent of Apollo, right? People who are actually respectable, you can enjoy spending time around them, you can laugh alongside them, independent of Apollo, right? Or I should say at the time, Ajax. He used to hang around in this server called Amigakuri, and I will say this is at the time when Six used to actively go into servers and debate. Noodles used to be seen as a high tier. So this is really far back in the past. So this is even at the time where I didn't even debate yet. I was still like a tech goon who just like looked around in text and then spoke to people and listened to debates. Apollo at the time, he was trying to make a name for himself as a narrative debater, and I will say the reason why you actually don't hear anything about Apollo, any of Apollo's performances within Naruto, regardless of how much he's been debating it and for how long, is due to the fact that Apollo is fundamentally incapable of debating anything that which you are unable to vastly knowledge cliff the other person on a variety of niche topics. In other words, Apollo is a horrible reasoner. Apollo's first main debate performances were against somebody called Donna, where he was debating Donna. I'm pretty sure it was on Han versus somebody else. Donna obviously was some background character, Discord debater, who used to be seen as B plus tier. So to give you a retrospective on how long ago this was back when tiers were still ranked in A plus, B plus, C plus. So this was far beyond when we used to give tiers numbers. Apollo engaged in active beef with this guy after getting his head pounded in on a multitude of occasions by Donna. Finally, he recovered, and after getting amped by, I'm pretty sure it was Shonen Page, Noodles, and the Six, he was finally able to beat Donna, and that was Apollo's first Discord debate fee. However, again, Apollo was relatively normal. Usually, you could interact with him normally. The only sort of thing there is Apollo, because he was the owner of the server, you could already tell, you could see the telltale signs of a superiority complex forming within him, where he would ask you for favors specifically to get higher pumps in the server. The same sort of thing that Seth did. Now, I'm not going to sit here and complain, right, and say, oh my god, Apollo did something wrong. Really, I don't really care, right? The thing I do care about, though, is the fact that Apollo is a socially inept loser, right? And that's the thing. But aside from that, we need to also segue into specifically the other thing, which is Apollo's e-girlfriend, also known as Demon. I forget her real name, or I forget her other name, but she was known as Demon. Demon was this e-girl in Apollo's server who supposedly Apollo, right, had a strong relationship with. Apollo even said that he was going to meet up with her soon. Now, again, you'll notice that this is a lie, because Demon actually lives in America and Apollo has stayed in Jamaica for all of his life. So because of that, whenever he makes statements and he actually tries to brag with you about his relationships or about things that are going on in his life, I want you to know that most, if not all of the time, that it's a lie, right? So again, whenever he's engaging with Demon, well, whenever he's called out for his weird dating behavior, all he'll say is, oh, well, don't you know that some celebrities e-date? It's like, that's obviously false. These people who are celebrities who e-date, it isn't e-dating, it's long distance relationship. 2, they have the financial funds to be able to meet up with their partner. 3, they didn't meet their partner over Discord. 4, they aren't Discord debaters and they don't actively involve their partner with Discord debating. Whereas with Apollo, any sort of attempt made to interact with his e-girlfriend will get you an instant ban from his server, showing how protective he is, how much of a loving, fat, ugly boyfriend he is. That shows you already the beginning signs of e-dating and the e-dating disease that has infested itself into Apollo's soul. After the Amigakure times, you will also notice that most of his servers continuously got nuked. Now, I will say I, in fact, was responsible for one of those nukes. I did nuke one of his servers specifically. Not because at the time I had beef with them. It was particularly just funny, right? Like, obviously, Apollo's worked really hard on making these servers. And what better thing to do with your time than spend 2 minutes ruining everything Apollo's worked hard for? Especially when Apollo is such an absolute loser about every single thing he goes into do. But ignoring all of the hate speaking about Apollo, moving on from that, we have his debate with Six. So later on within Apollo's debate career, because again, I was actively there for most of it, later on within his debate career, Apollo decided to get in VC and debate with Six. And when I tell you that this was the absolute most horrible beating that has ever engaged in my life, like, is ridiculous. But that isn't the actual important thing. The important thing is Apollo would go around, right? Even back then, by the way, he would go around in people's DMs. He even go around in my DMs saying that he needed money, asking for money on Discord like a little beg rat that he is, right? And I know he doesn't like people like knowing this, but he actually went into Jester's DMs and asked him for money, right? Because he said he wanted to make some online purchases, when in reality Apollo is actually struggling to make ends meet. And I'll let you know like how I know this is true immediately. So Apollo supposedly works at Verizon, and I'm going to pull up an interesting screenshot, right? Because Apollo says, oh, working at Verizon is not a proper job, but in reality Verizon doesn't actually hire employees in Jamaica, right? The only thing in which you can work in Jamaica is outsourced call center vendors, right? Meaning that he would need to be working at a call center in order to be making his money. Now, you may be asking yourself, okay, well, what's wrong with working at a call center? Nothing in reality. The fact is, though, that he flaunts and he flexes on people for being poor while being poor himself. That's also the height of hypocrisy. Now, you may also be asking, well, how do I know Apollo is poor? The reason is specifically because Apollo makes £5. No. He makes the equivalent of £5, I think it's £5 an hour, right? If he works for 40 hours a week, by the way, he will only make $200. And obviously Apollo isn't working 40 hours a week. He's probably also doing it part-time. So the amount of money he's making is even less, right? So because of that, Apollo, not only is he struggling to make ends meet, he's also trying to extort people on Discord for money, right? You know, it's an excellent villain backstory, I'll say that. So I'm going to give you an example, and these are two examples. So one, in Apollo's DMs with Jester, Apollo likes to pretend as if he doesn't like Jester. He thinks Jester is really bad. But whenever he actually engages with Jester specifically, not only will you notice the vast rhetorical gulf between the two of them, you will also notice the vast gulf in terms of substance and reasoning skills between the two of them. Take, for example, whenever both of them spoke about lookism, you notice that Apollo would continuously get his head punched inwards, right? The sort of rhetoric you try and use would not work. You'd be completely ineffective. Not only because his opponent has a louder mic than him, but also his opponent is far more respected than him. And also the fact that there's way more things to make fun of, right? Whenever you're thinking of Apollo in comparison to anybody else. And if you add that all on to top of the fact that Apollo doesn't know how to make himself the butt of a joke. Now, I know that making yourself look like a clown all of the time, right, is kind of beg behavior, but at least sometimes you need to be able to laugh at yourself. Apollo seems to be fundamentally incapable of being the butt of the joke, instead of actually just taking it on the chin, right? Because that's how friends behave with one another. Instead, Apollo becomes deeply confrontational, right? But back onto the main issue, Apollo in Jester's DMs, in fact, and I'll pull up the screenshot now, right? Because I have it all put into one singular server, right? Let me pull it up. So there's this one. So Mr. Malik Guy he's been receiving money from people on Discord specifically for him to give them debate lessons. Now, I know it's a completely ridiculous purchase to actually pay people for debate lessons, right? But it's also even more ridiculous that you, who's struggling to make ends meet, who should know the value of money far better than anybody else, right? Instead of actually putting them on, and instead of actually doing what they paid you to do, instead he chooses to scam them, right? And that's also one other deplorable aspect of Apollo's character, is that he chooses to scam people over Discord debating, which is actually not only ridiculous, morally abhorrent, but also is actually hilarious, right? It's hilarious because he claims to have a proper job, he claims to be somebody who works, he claims to be somebody who's entirely different than most of the debating community. But if all of those claims are true, right, then somebody explain to me, why is he begging people for money, right? Then there's a set of other screenshots actually that I want to show you. There's some, and in fact I'll read this from Apollo, by the way, and this is to Quark. Ooh, yeah, the list just keeps getting bigger. Hold on, I'm gonna post it in the server and then 3, 4, 5 screenshots. Okay, so if you look at this, right, you see your Jester. Sup. Keep in mind, Jester airs for a whole 40 minutes, right? After that, that was just gonna ask you to borrow some really small cash, really small, but he changed his mind. Oh, good. Let me know if anything. He said, yeah, I want to add it to some funds I have to pay off something online. Like, no, you don't have anything to pay off online. Instead, right, what you have is the fact that you continue to make purchases. You continue to try and, all right, keep in mind, this is the reason why he asks people for nitro, right, but does not buy it himself, because again, most people would just be transparent and say either A, they can't be bothered with buying nitro, which isn't the case for Apollo. Apollo would need to work for multiple hours in order to afford nitro, right? But not only that, it's also the fact that Apollo, he just can't buy it. He can't buy it. He can't add it to one of his funds, right? He can't buy it. And because of that, Apollo just needs to go up to Discord and scrounge and beg the people who he usually behaves so far, oh, I'm above you, oh, I'm so far above you, right? These are the sorts of people who he's acting like this to, right? And yet he's in their DMs begging, right? The Vinny girl, right, who he was actually texting in the screenshots who I showed you beforehand, he was like, oh no, haha, that ugly Indian bitch. And it's like, wait, hold on, you said she was an ugly Indian bitch? Hold on, but is that consistent with these screenshots? Ooh, you look pretty. Oh, you've been a green flag the entire time. Oh, what do you think is going through my mind? Probably something like holding my waist, I guess, or something more intimate. But focus on your current girl. Not only is he an e-data, he's also a 2-timing e-data. He's also a 2-timing poor e-data, which, wow, gosh, it gets worse and worse the more you look at all of the screenshots. But again, the way he became like this was actually through one fateful debate, and the debate was whenever he debated Spencer. So they got in, I'm pretty sure the server was called Spinner's Lab. He got into Spencer's server and they started arguing about some Naruto topic, and everyone in the chat was like, woo, Apollo won, haha, Apollo won, right? Because specifically he would ping in the server to ask people to go into his chat, to the chat, and say he was winning. So everyone was doing that, and then Apollo finally, he busted up the confidence to speak to Spencer like he was an equal, and then finally he convinced himself that he won. After that, Apollo decided that, oh, if I'm going to evolve to my next arc or my next phase of debating, and these are his words verbatim, by the way, if I'm going to in fact, let me sound this out. If I'm going to evolve to my next stage of debating, I'm going to need to change my name. So anyone who does not acknowledge me by my current identity, I will block you. Keep in mind, this was actually a threat he made good on. Whenever I continue to call him Ajax, but whether it was by accident or not, Apollo would continuously block me for like, I'm pretty sure it's like maybe an hour. And I don't really notice because then he's like asking me to add him back right after. But literally after an hour, he would sit there and say, oh my god, yeah, sure, add me back, bro, add me back, just stop calling me Apollo Ajax, right? Just stop calling me Apollo. Keep in mind, this might also be the reason why he doesn't want to be connected with the Ajaxes. If I know what true love is, it's because of my babe. Come on, and keep in mind, this is the guy who goes on there, by the way. And this is also something else I wanted to touch upon. Glaucoma, who goes actually on live, she shows her face. She's very public and open about her face. She, what's it called? Apollo would sit there and call her ugly, say she's an MTB. And keep in mind, right, Glock has never interacted with Apollo in her life, right? So Apollo is entirely doing this for the attention of one person and one person only, and that's Orihime. Because Orihime, who used to be Apollo's student, then they beefed, now they're student and teacher again, then they beefed, now they're student and teacher again. Finally, like, he starts treating Orihime like an equal, quote unquote, right? And started upscaling Orihime on this tier list, even though I will add, Orihime has never had a single debate since 2016, well, like, I'm pretty sure it was like 2020, I'm pretty sure, whenever he got his head beaten by Jester. But ignoring that, because Orihime is now turned into an incel, look smackser, black pill, like, engaging individual, right? Apollo's also started to pick up those mannerisms. Basically, he's code switching, and through code switching, he's now trying to fit in, and he's trying to fit in by just calling women ugly out of the blue, women who don't interact with him. He's not actually realized that none of this behavior is even in the slightest bit attractive, but it's also extremely creepy, like sitting around, going around and calling women ugly, right? Women who don't know you, right? Women who probably get far more interaction than you, and not even if they don't get far more interaction with you, who do you think you are? Somebody who sits around and beg people for money. Who do you even think you are in the slightest to actually go around and start commenting on what other people do and how other people look? Aside from that, there's in fact more screenshots that we can go through. So Yo, 1PK. Is Gracie actually a girl? She text sexy as fuck. What does that even mean? I don't know if she was trolling. Don't tell anyone I asked her. And you'll notice that how he sent that in the DMs, and 1PK then proceeded to share that around. And the reason why he shared that around, not only is it because Apollo really has no real friends, and I'll be honest, okay, so if you're probably somebody from Apollo's videos, go come on here, and if they reach this point of the video, then you just need to sit here and ask yourself, what casual conversation? No, can you name 5 things external to debating, external from the connections that Apollo gives you, external from the group chats that Apollo invites you to, external from the people who you shit talk all on your own, you and Apollo, you say a VC and you shit talk, external to debating is in its entirety. What do you like about Apollo? Or rather, what would you speak to Apollo about? Right? If you're unable to sit there and tell me, maybe you can ping me on Discord or comment on the video, what can you actually like speak to Apollo about? The answer is nothing. There's nothing interesting about him. He's like a robot who sits there regurgitating things he's heard from a book. Maybe he applies critical thinking once or twice in like whenever lightning strikes the same person twice or something, right? He employs critical thinking sometimes, but in every single other interaction where he's like unable to completely knowledge cliff the person, you'll realize that he actually is just a completely incompetent waste of space, waste of life loser, right? And I'll give you a perfect example. Whenever he was interacting and debating C on veganism, the very obvious, the very like literally obvious, and I don't know any sort of person who would question this premise that you should not increase suffering without good reason. Apollo says, maybe that's true sometimes, but not others. Like, what is wrong with you, right? Like, what sort of idiotic response, idiotic critique to the argument is being given? Instead of saying that the sort of suffering that, and keep in mind, this is a veganism debate, right? So he would either need to say, give a reason why the suffering is good enough, or there's a good enough reason in the case of animals to kill and make animals suffer, or he would need to say that, it's not always wrong. But trivially, it is always wrong to cause people suffering, right? Will cause entities suffering without like sufficient reason. Like these sorts of things, especially whenever you notice that he doesn't have all of his goons out. For example, you know what? I'm going to name names. If you really think about it, right? Look at Hyde Cakemouth, right? Hyde Cakemouth, not only does he have goons, I can talk to Hyde about stuff, right? And I can talk to Hyde about stuff like, and keep in mind, Hyde has his own self-claimed, self-created syndicate, right? And it's fine. I don't care. So Hyde has his own created syndicate, and they all think he's really good. That isn't the thing I'm here to point out, because I don't particularly care about it. There are things I can speak to Hyde about. I can DM Hyde, talk to Hyde about lookism. DM Hyde, talk to Hyde about play new manhwa I'm reading. DM Hyde, make crude jokes with Hyde. I can't do that with Apollo. Nobody can do that with Apollo, because Apollo is essentially a robot with a Discord account, right? And you notice, in fact, through all of the other messages, right? So, one, you can obviously see him trying to rent a femboy. Absolute loser, right? Then, I feel so bad right now about those screenshots. I just wanted to get with Gracie, and you did not tell me this could have happened. I just wanted the Aniga that was sexy as fuck, but I guess the King of Polo is going to have to retire. He's gonna he's gonna have to retire from Discord debating without ever getting her. My fans are so keep in mind, by the way, right, all of the people who he says should go and comment on his videos, right, that he calls quote unquote his fans, he doesn't actually think you're his fans. Like, he doesn't actually think you're his fans. I know that, in fact, there are some people on Discord who can say with their head held high, yes, I'm not Apollo's friend, instead I'm Apollo's goon. I don't know how you can sit here with your chest out and say that. I don't know how that's all your life amounts to. It's being somebody on Discord's goon. But people actually on Discord are fine with that. And I had a conversation with somebody actually where I was like, yo, Apollo like literally doesn't care about you at all. He doesn't think you're his friend. He just thinks you're his goon and supporter. It's like, yeah, what's wrong with that? So it's like anybody with even an ounce of self-respect to say that there is something wrong with that. But no, right? No, you notice that the supporters, right, quote unquote, they would just choose to specifically ignore these sorts of things. In fact, even if you do support Apollo, you aren't able to tell me that you would support Apollo for reasons external to his own debate skill. Because in general, Apollo, not only is he a bad person, right, but he's also a loser. And I think being a loser is worse than being a bad person. Now, keep in mind, you have this. Maybe a surprise. How big is your dick? Realistically, a 4. But I won't fuck you unless you send me a pic of you arching. Lol. I'm being dead serious, by the way. Show me a pic that looks closest to your butt. And you ever done a BBL before? Keep in mind, by the way, Cork is like barely 18. He's asking a barely 18-year-old if they've ever done a BBL. What's wrong with this guy? You won't be able to know. Alright, there's a few more stuff actually. And like the list keeps going on. Like actually, we can go from the top. So, no stay, say please, by the way. This guy's getting led on like a dog. Say please. Do you like it when I say please? I like doing things you like, so I'll say it. Please. Keep in mind, this is a complete inability to speak to any actual woman. Because I want you to know, like, Apollo wouldn't speak like this to any other person, right? So Apollo is literally, putting on a puppy voice, right? Doing all of this weird stuff. Yeah, immediately these people are done with the relationship. Immediately he's back to being TKA. Immediately he's back to being extremely toxic, right? Immediately he's back to being a loser, right? Not to say that this behavior isn't already loser-like. It's obviously loser-like, right? But, you notice that, like, quite literally, this isn't the TKA you respect. Let's be honest. This isn't TKA. His real name is Malik Guy, right? Malik in Hindi means owner over here. Let me own you. Who says that to somebody? Like, hello? Sorry. Anyways, I had to pause the video because I was reading the new Shadow Slave chapters. Keep in mind, by the way, Morgan is obviously in love with Kai, but ignoring all of that, back to hating on Apollo. His name's Malik Guy. He's unable to flirt with women. Is there really much else we want to go? Obviously, you can see like all of the messages he sent to her. Keep in mind, by the way, this is a girl who not only is he threatening to dox, but also he keeps continuously calling her ugly, harassing her after. Right? He in fact, multiple times, and these are DMs that she said personally for me to not show. Multiple times he's tried to persuade her into sending him explicit images. Right? However, she's continuously said no, which led to him, quote unquote, losing interest, when in reality she just didn't want to talk to him. Yeah, so not only is he a sexual deviant, he's also a bad debater. You can look at his debate with C for that. You can look at his debates with Infinity for that. You can look at his debates with Jester for that. He is socially inept. You can just speak to him for that one. And yeah, I mean, there's not really much else to say. Oh yeah, in terms of TikTok debating, right, Apollo might actually be the least respected guy. Whenever I see him go on lives and I join immediately after, everyone is left with a bad taste in their mouth because they generally just don't like to speak to him. He has the complete inability to be able to treat other people properly. Like there was a debate I was listening to. It was Red Iron versus Kojo. By the way, Kojo beat the brakes off of him, right? But it was Red Iron versus Kojo, and then Red Iron was like, hey, why are you getting rhetorical, blah blah blah, why are you being aggressive? And then Apollo just butts into the conversation being like, I think he's saying, why are you getting rhetorical? Because I joined. Nobody cares that you joined. Nobody cares, and nobody cares, nobody asked it, nobody's concerned. Right. So again, there's also just the constant trying to butt himself into every single conversation which he's in. And yeah, generally, I think that's just been a clear, concise, and succinct summary of the Apollo e-dating cycle. There's not much else to say, so yeah, just if you want to interact with Apollo, please do keep in mind he doesn't actually care about what you have to say. If the next words that come out of your mouth aren't Apollo is the best, Apollo is tier 1, Apollo is better than Arianas, and Apollo 1. Oh, and Apollo W, all of the Apollo supporting variants. Right. Any critiques will be seen as a personal attack to his character and his lifestyle. And yeah, if you like the video, remember to like and subscribe. This has been Shenra. The loser and the screenshot was Malik Guy, also known as Apollo. And I'm out.